Welcome to the Clear to Close podcast with our hosts, local mortgage expert Ryan Bolton and Carson Jones, owner of Team Honey with Red Rock Real Estate. Ryan and Carson have the questions and answers, tips and tricks, do's and don'ts, and expert guests to help explain all the steps needed to buy or sell real estate. And now it's time for the Clear to Close podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to the Clear to Close podcast, where we, as the intro says, we help you buy real estate. Such a great thing to do. So one of the most important things with buying real estate is negotiating on the home. You found a home, you may be limited down to one or two. You've gone out and drove around with your real estate agent and say, now it's time to put an offer on the home, get to the nitty gritty, start looking at dates, get the calendars out, go through all the stuff. So let's go through some tips on the best way to negotiate on actually buying a house.
Yeah. I mean, of course, the number one tip is going to be have somebody who's done it before help you out, right? I tell you, the first thing you got to make sure of is don't let your dad come in and tell you what you need to buy this house for, because that's usually what happens, especially with, say, a college-age kid just got out of the house and they're going to buy their first home. It's usually dad telling you, this is what you're going to buy. This is what you need to offer on the house. More often than not, you end up not getting that house because dad wants you to get everything for as cheap as humanly possible, right? So with that said, I would say that really when we talk about the negotiating process and tips with that, you have to start actually on the seller side. And you have to, because realistically, the first offer is made by the seller. A lot of people think, okay, well, the first offer is going to be made by the buyer. We're going to go in and write up an offer. You really begin the process by listing your home and deciding on an actual price. And if we pull up that first slide that we have here today, we'll kind of talk about really price guidance, and that's how we're going to actually be able to figure out what your home is worth, okay? And then what's the initial asking price that we're going to be saying, and essentially it's the seller's offer. We're offering this home at this price,
Yeah,
right?
They always have an asking price, and that's what they're starting at. That's the starting point of the negotiation, absolutely.
Exactly, and making sure that you have a fair asking price is key. Now, if we were to be talking, say, early 2021 through mid-2022, having a fair asking price was not the key. It was just having a asking price. Yeah. You could have a house worth $800,000, and no joke, some people would list that at $1 million, other people would list that at $600,000. And either way, you're going to be selling well over $800,000. So nowadays, it's much more important that you're getting people to list their house at a home at a price that's actually has some potential to sell and has somewhat of a fair market value, because your appraisal, if somebody's getting a loan, they're going to have to get an appraisal, right? So having the guidance, A, from a real estate agent, and B, not from your Zillow's estimate, is very important. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't really consider, is they don't consider that listing price as literally an offer for the house from that seller. Right. I mean, more often than not,
it's kind of the buy it now price. You know, it's the eBay buy it now price.
That's right. That's right. So you're trying to negotiate that down. And if there's high demand, sometimes that actually goes up a little bit. Right. So that's always kind of step one, is making sure that your seller has a price that you can actually actually be productive with, and something that actually has somewhat of a potential. Because a lot of people, they feel bad to write an offer $100,000 under asking price, and so sometimes they just won't actually write an offer because they think it's too high a price. I recommend, as really an important tip, is even if you think the home is overpriced as a buyer, still put in your best offer. Put in an offer and say, hey, I know this is way off, and I hope you don't get offended, but here's an offer for the home. So that's probably the first step, is kind of figuring out what's the actual value for the house between the seller, and then figuring out what the buyer is willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people that will go into it with a much lower price, and I found a lot of times part of the negotiation is trying to get more for the price and not all of a sudden just really, really dramatically lower it. So I've had clients that'll say, okay, let's use $450 or something, $450, and so we're going to offer $4. It's like, well, obviously that's a lot of a reduction to it. We're not seeing those kind of huge reductions yet. They're really pretty priced pretty correctly. But honestly, the sales price is what somebody else is willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Whether it's your Coke on the, whether you're going to the grocery store to get a Coca-Cola or whether you're buying a house, the prices are set by demand, by supply, and what people are willing to pay for that item. If there's a scarcity to it, it's going to be worth more. If there's just a ton of them, they're going to be worth less. That's just kind of how economics work, whether it's a house or not. There's also going to be differences of lot size and square footage and quality of construction versus neighbors or other things in that area. That's why real estate's always location, location, location. The home right on the beach is going to be different than in Blackfoot, Idaho. Even if it's the same exact house, it's going to have a different price as well. So that's why it is so important to set that first price as best you can. Now, obviously, a buyer and a seller have totally different views. The buyer wants it as cheap as possible. The seller wants it as much as possible. So that's where this negotiation starts. But I think a lot of times people will try to reduce the price so much where I always tell them you're better off to get a little more for the price by rolling in closing costs or warranties or things like that. Yeah. Are you seeing an increase in that where sellers are more willing to kind of keep the price where they had it, but just offer more with carpet allowances or a seller consent? Are you seeing that start to kick up a little bit?
They are, and it's actually something that I don't encourage to my sellers. A lot of times you'll see in the remarks there that the seller is offering a $3,000 or $4,000 concession to the buyer. And I recommend that they really just drop the price that $3,000 or $4,000 rather than offering a concession. Number one is because that isn't searchable on the MLS. It's not searchable right now to actually search for. I only want homes that are offering concessions. You can get concessions on any home that you want. You just have to write it in the offer. Let's say that your closing costs on your loan are $12,000, right, as a buyer, and you want to buy this house for $500K, right? So no matter what, you want to be at $500,000, but you don't want to spend any more than that $500K. Actually, in terms of the actual net number on what you're selling that house for. So as a seller, I'm looking, okay, so these guys, they want $500K and they got $12,000 in closing costs. If they come to you and offer you $500,000 minus that $12,000, you really are only getting $488. Okay, so the way I look at that is I'm saying, well, we're only going to take $500 net. So we want you to offer $512, and then we'll give you that $12,000 in closing costs. So I would make sure to, offer that into any offer. Just know you might have to increase the price a little bit to offset for that. But a lot of people, you'd much rather have that extra $12,000 worked into your loan over time rather than just having to have the cash up front right away.
No, I agree. And a lot of people don't realize you have your down payment, then you're going to have to cover the closing costs. Now, closing costs aren't just all loan origination or processing fees. You're going to have title, you're going to have home inspection, you're going to have other fees that kind of add up to it. So they're not all just fees. There's stuff just required to get the house. You've got the property taxes. You've got your homeowner's insurance. A lot of times you have to bring that first year's premium to closing. Is that really a closing cost or just part of buying the house? So it is something where you got to know those things are on top. Yeah. And a lot of times it can add up pretty quickly, just all those little things. And adding it to the price, whether you can negotiate it as part of the price or have to add it, you're better off than having to bring more money to the table or finance it some other way or pull out more money out of the 401k. Now, if you're rolling equity from another house, you might have a little more room to cover that, but you got to realize your down payment and closing costs are two separate things. Yeah. They're not, and even 100% financing typically is 100% on the purchase price, not the other things included as well. There's very few programs that do truly 100% cover closing costs and the down payment. So you're still going to have some of that money to work with. But building into price is by far the cheapest way to do it. Yeah. Having to build it into a second mortgage or having to build it into a bigger 401k loan or something like that always has a bigger payment than just slightly adding it to the price. Yeah. Even if you have to go above, like you said, go to 510, go to 515. Not only that, you might get a better offer. The seller kind of has a number in their head as well. They feel like they're netting that or getting that number. A lot of times they don't care if the price goes up to offset that as long as the appraisal comes in. If you have something where it's not even worth $5 and they're selling it at $5 because they have amenities or something or location or something, then adding it to the price is where you may have to go back and renegotiate after the appraisal comes in.
Well, and some people, especially even during COVID, they were actually just saying, "I'll pay whatever it appraises for," right? And that can be a dangerous game because, unfortunately, appraisers are not all the same. And it could really depend
on opinion of value.
Yeah, it can still depend on which appraiser you get. I've seen appraisers where we have to end up getting multiple appraisals on a house because we think one is just way off. We say we're just going to get another opinion on it. And I've seen $35,000 differences between two different appraisers all within the same month on the exact same house. So that's one thing you do need to watch out for is that if you want to just say, I'm just going to pay whatever it's going to appraise for, that could that could just be very broad. You could be paying way over. I mean, if you say we'll pay the appraisal price and you put that into your offer, that could be well over the asking price. You could be paying more than you really want to. So negotiating before the appraisal, especially, and before just saying, oh, I'll just pay whatever it appraises for, you have actually a lot more power then. So now if we go to the second slide, the next one we're going to be talking about is negotiating after the inspection. And I would say this is kind of the third big step in your negotiating. First, you've got the sellers making their initial offer for the asking price of the home. Next, you've got the buyers actually making an offer, and now you have negotiating after the inspection, right?
Yeah, so this is after the contract's already signed, you get new information, so you want to go back and reopen negotiation.
Right. Okay. Now, some people, that $500,000 house, they might look at this $500,000 house and say, hey, we know that there's going to be a good $15,000, $20,000 in repairs. You could just tell that the house is a little bit rough shape. So people might just offer a little bit higher on the house just to get it under contract, with the thought in the back of their mind of thinking, well, I'm just going to ask for a whole bunch of money off after this inspection. Doesn't always work out in your favor, though, because sometimes you get through that inspection and you realize that, yeah, it's in a little bit rough shape, but it's not something that you have $20,000, $30,000 in repairs. It's a lot of it is just kind of cosmetics type stuff, depending on the house. So yes, negotiating after the inspection is extremely common, right? And like we've talked about in other episodes, I always would recommend that you negotiate the price instead of negotiating for the seller to make those repairs for you. With that said, you're usually still going to be pretty close. It's rare that you're going to see somebody come in and say, now we want to drop the price by 10% or something like that because of this inspection, right? If it's going to be that much, people are usually just going to be backing out of the house altogether. But it's another great time to change around the price, and you can bring that into play when you make your initial offer to get that contract, and then you have that due diligence deadline set up so that you can do your inspection and decide, hey, now we want to drop the price X amount in order to make up for some of these repairs that are needed.
Yeah, I think that's something most people don't realize, that you can get the price kind of up where everybody's at least comfortable, and you do have some opportunities to renegotiate the price. Are you seeing anything else that strengthens with, as you're negotiating, with the deadlines that are on the contract? Are you seeing something where that can make your offer stand out a little bit more as you're negotiating?
Absolutely.
To be able to set deadlines that are a little bit more of a tighter window or a shorter time to close? Because you got to realize, if it's a hot property or something you really want, you want to have a balance between, well, I don't want to lose it because we negotiated too much, but at the same time, I don't want to just give away the farm. But I think sometimes that's one of the little tip you can do, is just look at a calendar, kind of shorten your time frames so your offer stands out a little more, even if it's a little bit cheaper.
Well, and yeah, that's a great point. And actually, this is one of the things that I feel that my buyers always have an advantage of when they work with me, is because what I like to do is I want to be as communicative as possible. I don't even think that's the right word. I want to communicate with the other agent as much as possible, and get to know exactly what their situation is, because that can play a big factor into it. Sometimes the person who's selling the house, maybe they don't have a house to move into yet. And so sometimes all it takes is saying, hey, here's our offer, and with this offer, we're going to let you lease back the house for maybe free, maybe just a small amount of money for, say, 2 to 3 months, right? You do that, that could actually be enough that even though your offer may be a little bit lower than another offer, just the fact that you're willing to let them still live in the house for a couple months afterwards might be enough to win you the deal. So sometimes it's not always the money that's going to help you get this deal, and it might be just making sure some of the needs are met of the other party. And I think that's one thing that some of the top negotiators in the world, non-real estate related, do very well, is they make sure that some of the little small things that the other party wants are taken care of. And those are a lot of the times the thing that's going to help make the decision. Is these little small things that don't really matter too much are important to some people. And so I look at lease back agreements like that. I look at stuff like a refrigerator. Sometimes people are just in love with their refrigerator and say, hey, no, it's fine, you keep it. We don't need your refrigerator. And there's sellers who will say, hey, we like this offer better, just because they're willing to let us keep our refrigerator from 1945 that we love, Right. So yeah.
And I think it's where the contract, how you propose that contract, kind of put the dates on it. You really want to review those and put together the strongest offer that you can, that can stand out from other things. Do you see that earnest money plays into it? I know a lot of people will say, okay, $1,000 earnest money, how much earnest money should I do? And I often tell them, well, whatever you can, whatever can make your offer stand out, because it does look like it's stronger to say $1,000 and another offer is $5,000, well, that person may be a little easier, maybe have a easier time closing on the loan, whether it's cash or financed or whatever. Do you see that as a negotiating tool as well to kind of increase earnest money? Or is that more, it depends on the seller, I guess? But
yes and no. Yes, especially during COVID, when the market was just booming there for a little while. Yes, it was important that you had good earnest money in there to show your interest actually in the home. However, I think unfortunately earnest money is something that's probably not discussed enough, and I can't tell you how often buyers and sellers that we talk to, they have no clue what earnest money even is, right?
Okay.
And so I think it's something that we need to teach people. Maybe we'll do an earnest money episode at some point, kind of teaching people exactly what this is and what this means. But the earnest money is important because it's showing really what your intentions are with the home. If you really want to buy it, you're probably going to have a little bit extra earnest money in there. And remember, your earnest money is refundable to you up until either your due diligence or your financing and appraisal deadline. So you have lots of time. Now, a lot of the times, if you put a higher amount down, you could put $20,000 down and you're still going to get it back if you decide, hey, this house just isn't for us, right? Really, the only times that the seller is going to receive that is at the end when if you just back out last minute. Another thing to think about with that earnest money, though, that really nobody knows about is if the seller decides to back out, they're actually going to pretty much have to owe you the same amount of the earnest money if they were to back out. And very, very few people know that. Even a lot of real estate agents don't realize this. And so a lot of people say, oh, well, I just decided now I don't want to sell my house even though I'm under contract. What's going to happen to me, right? And one of the main things is that if that earnest money that you agreed on, that's also to the seller, right? So if the seller decides, hey, I'm backing out, that seller, you're going to give the earnest money back to the buyer. But let's say it was $20,000. That's also incentives for the seller not to decide to back out, because that seller is now going to be more than likely going to have to come up with $20,000 to give to the buyer. People don't really think about that too often, and it's definitely something that you got to consider. There's more times than not that really that doesn't. A buyer might say, "Oh, that's fine. Like, let's just move on. We're good." But just know, legally in that real estate purchase contract, it's what it says. I mean, that counts for both the buyer and seller defaults on there. So.
Yeah, there's way more protections for the buyer. The buyer can get out almost any time as long as the deadlines, even after deadlines, you see sometimes like, okay, it's not worth the fight. It's not worth that. Give them their $1,000 back or whatever. When it's more, then obviously there's an incentive there to maybe fight for a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed how many people think it's just gone. It's just lost. It's just not whatever, when it really is a credit that you get towards that price at the end, whether it's towards
part of
down
your
payment or closing costs. It just becomes a kind of a credit at the end of the total amount you have to bring into closing.
Right.
And you can get it back as long as you don't pass deadlines with it. Yeah. And this is part of negotiating on the house as well, is being ready for those financing options, being ready for this, whether it is increase your earnest money deposit. And really getting pre-approved is such a crucial part. Every agent we'll talk about as lenders that know you have your loan in place, knowing that it's ready to go. You can close those gaps between those deadlines so much more if your loan's already in place.
For sure.
If you're out shopping for a house and you haven't done a pre-approval, done your pay stubs, W-2s, gotten kind of pre-approved, then you can't set the deadlines very short, which makes your offer not stand out as much.
Yeah.
So the stronger you can make your offer, these little things will give you a better chance to get a better price or close quicker, get in the home faster, all those things. I see way too many people that we've talked about before that their lease is up at the end of the month. So they start looking for a loan with, in the same month that they need to. And they start looking at houses before they actually start working on what loan they're going to need. And I find that hurts you in the negotiation table because you don't have your pre-approval letter ready. I mean, how many times have you been an agent and the buyer's like, well, I've talked to a lender, but I don't have a pre-approval letter yet. Then why are you even looking at this house? We're not going to take your offer versus somebody that's already got their ducks in a row, already has their pre-approval, can close in 3 weeks instead of 45 days.
Right.
I mean, getting that step can be such a big part in negotiating on the home that people don't realize, is getting that part locked down. So when the home does show up on the market, you can, bam, I can close in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Where everybody else is putting 30 days or 45 days or 60 days out. Unless, obviously, if you're a seller that needs the time, maybe that doesn't matter as much. But most of the time when people put their home on the market, they want to get out. They're ready to go. They want to move.
There's a reason that they're doing that. Yeah, absolutely. Especially once they list it with a realtor. I mean, sometimes you get a for sale by owner and they're not quite as urgent to get it sold. With that said, I mean, another big tip to this negotiation is who you're working with and who you're hiring. And actually, when we talk about time frame, the lender is a big part of that. Of course, if you're writing a cash offer, a lot of times on a cash offer you can close in maybe 2 weeks or less, which could be that's one of the bigger incentives to a seller is when you're offering cash. Which of course, if you have cash and if you have nowhere else that you want to invest that, sure, buy a house with cash. Of course, you and I are always going to recommend, use that cash, buy a few houses, and just leverage that money.
Right.
With that said, I think a lot of people feel that a loan is always going to take 45 some days, and it doesn't have to. And with that said, that's why you hire the right lender, right? Team Honey, the team that I own and work with, we try to work with lenders like Ryan, who we know, okay, the day that we send you that contract is the day that you begin working. And actually, especially if we have a listing, you start working when we actually first list the house to get us the PRs, all that type of stuff. And same thing with the title company. With that said, if you hire the right people to help you buy or sell a house, they're going to be getting the things done quicker. And now all of a sudden you might be able to tell the seller, say, hey, you've got 2 offers. You've got an offer from these guys, and their lender's going to need 35, 40 days to close, but my lender's only going to need 3 weeks, right? And really a lot of that comes down to, okay, the lender, he ordered the appraisal right away, right? So now the appraisal's in, all that's done, your inspection's done, we're pretty much good to go. There's times that I've worked with you that all of a sudden 3.5, even sometimes sooner than that, you're like, hey, we're good to go. We're ready. Let's do this. And so it's always nice to be able to put in that offer, say, this is our settlement deadline, but we feel like we're going to be able to close sooner, Right. And unfortunately, there's a lot of lenders out there who can't, and they need that extra time, which it hurts your offer.
It really does. It's part of that negotiation part of it to know that that's done. I can't tell you how many times people are in front of a house that need a pre-approval letter.
Yeah.
Now sometimes we want to make sure the pre-approval letter matches what they're offering. So let's say they're pre-approved for $500, but they're only offering $450 because they've just found a house that's cheaper or whatever. We don't want the pre-approval letter to say $500. We want to match what they're offering.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed how many times that they haven't even done an application with me yet. Then they're trying to get a pre-approval letter. It's like, why would you want to be that rushed through the stressful situation anyway? And why would you want to take the only loan we can get you because you only have a small window to work with?
Yeah.
So it's so important as you're going to start looking at buying a house, get that part out of the way because it can strengthen your offer. You can have a pre-approval letter ready, that day, knowing that what your payment's going to be. I've done like the pre-approvals. Then all of a sudden we start working through the loan. The client's like, ooh, I don't want that payment. It's too high. It's like, well, we should have known that before you put your offer in. It's a little late now when you're under contract. Now you can still back out, of course, get your earnest money, but having that as part of your negotiation power and leveraging what's available as far as financing, whether it is a lesser down payment or that type of thing, or buying 2 properties or working something out because you do have some money to work with, it can help in so many ways to make sure you're getting the best price on the home and closing as quickly as you can. And one of the goals I always have is close early. Is always make sure that when I even set up the file, I'll put the settlement deadline earlier.
Yeah.
Just to make sure we got all of our other stuff out of the way. Because a lot of it we can control. Me and the client, we can control getting pay stubs, getting W-2s. But when it comes to getting the appraisal, we're kind of at the mercy of somebody else's schedule on how soon they can get out to the property, or if there's an issue with getting into the property because there's a renter that's currently in there, or the homeowner's in there, and whatever it might be. There's things that you have to kind of be reliant on other people's time frames. So the more you can keep it within your control, the controllables, the more likely you'll meet or exceed deadlines.
Yeah.
And that's just a great negotiating tool. Like you said, if you're a seller and you got a contract that's cash, and another one that sends and the dates are different, there's going to be ways to strengthen your file that's not all just based on price.
There are.
Obviously, price is a huge part. If you're negotiating way less price, even if you can close tomorrow, people might say, no, I don't need to close that quick, and I don't need to give up that much of the price. But part of negotiation on anything is being able to put the strongest offer you can to also get the seller to at least respond back and negotiate the differences that you both have.
And communicate it with the seller. Communicate to the seller. It's now. One thing that's definitely discouraged is their so-called love letters. So we actually got that a lot during that big COVID boom. Is you'd list a house and all of a sudden you got your 10 offers, and 5 of those offers were from a family, and they said, "Oh, our mother-in-law just passed away, and we just adopted this child from Rwanda, and feel bad for us." Right. Now those are very much discouraged. In fact, a lot of listings were saying we don't want letters. We won't even read them. We won't present them to our sellers. So that's a tactic that can be used. I don't recommend doing it. I recommend look what the seller needs, okay? ask the agent. I mean, say, hey, what's their situation? Are they moving somewhere? Are they already out of the house? Do they have 6 months worth of moving that they're going to have to do here? What do they need? Figure out what they need, use that into your offer, and that's going to play. It's almost playing in a way, it's a mind game of just saying, hey, we're helping you. We're giving you this price for the house, but we're also helping your other situation to get you into your new home, and we're gonna be flexible with you on that. And so maybe you are renting a house, and you could say, hey, that's fine. We'll keep our rental for an extra month. Maybe if you just let us move some of our stuff into the garage, we're gonna let you stay in the house for a little extra time. And I know we're about out of time here. And one thing I think we missed on, I got off subject there, was earnest money and just how much we would recommend. My recommendation to my buyers is try to do 1%. Sometimes you're going to see somebody just say $1,000, $10,000. My recommendation is 1% of the purchase price is a good amount.
Yeah, I think I've seen that a lot of times, and realize it is something that goes towards your credits. So it is something you don't just walk away from unless you get past settlement deadline and you haven't closed. That's
right.
the biggest thing. So
thanks so much for watching, and let us know if you have any questions about how to negotiate your next home sale.
Yep. Get the best price you can.
This has been the Clear to Close podcast with Ryan Bolton and Carson Jones. Please submit your comments, questions, and topics for future episodes to cleartoclosepod@gmail.com. That's clear the number 2 closepod@gmail.com. Or find myhomeutah.com or ryanbolton.com. Please like, follow, and share. And until next time, this is the Clear to Close podcast. Views expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Patriot Home Mortgage or Team Honey with Red Rock Real Estate. License number NMLS 299717. This has been a production from a podcast studio.